Hey tubers, it's Ben the Curious Consumer, and today have I got an issue. I went online the other day and I found one of these Xbox One Elite controllers on eBay for about $40. It did say it had some issues. It does have the typical broken bumper, which we can fix, very easy fix. But as you can tell on the screen here, we have another issue. We have stick drift. Today I want to fix this. And just to explain to you what stick drift actually is, it's just like getting an oil change in a car. Over time, you have to replace some parts. In a controller, with as much of the moving around that we do, the jumping, the crouching, all that kind of stuff we do on these controllers, these little parts inside get worn out. And sometimes they need to be replaced. So today, I'm going to show you guys how to do that. Okay, so as you can see, I've got the controller apart. What I'm going to do is start by putting some tape on the rumble motors on the bottom of the controller here, just so they don't keep falling out. Now I do this specifically because as those rumble motors keep falling out from flipping the controller back and forth, it could cause damage to the wire. You don't have to desolder those. You could if you wanted to be very careful. You'll notice too there's some tape here in the middle, so what I'm going to do is open up my blade and take some of that tape off. I don't want that to get in the way when I try to desolder this controller. But what I'm going to do is desolder these 16 points and try not to touch the inside. This is the new piece that I want to install. So once I get that old one out, I'm going to put the new one in. So what I'm going to do is start by getting my soldering iron warmed up. I am going to try to solder wick this. When you're holding solder wick, it can burn your fingers, so keep it kind of wrapped up in this plastic piece, and you just want to put it over the top of the solder points and just heat it up with your solder gun. And what that should do is cause the solder to warm up and liquefy and then get sucked up into the solder wick. And so we're going to go around the controller here and do that. So I've got to take the board off. So what I'm going to do is just lightly pull the board away. Got to be careful, there are connectors underneath the board here. And you can just set the board right on top of the triggers. And you want to make sure you have a good clean area to work with here. So again, just make sure there's nothing in the way that's going to hinder where you're going to hit with the soldering iron. And I'm going to try to warm up the solder joints. And essentially what I'm trying to do is melt the solder onto the solder wick. Well, it's not really working. So what I realized after trying this for a lot of time, sometimes you got to be careful with the products that you're buying online. You don't know exactly what it was that people have done to their controllers or any of the components that you might be trying to purchase. So one thing to keep in mind is maybe ask questions before you purchase. In this case, I knew there were broken parts. I knew there was stick drift. I didn't know, however, that the person who owned this controller before tried to resolder the thumbstick on with silver solder, which requires an extremely high temperature to get off. And in some cases, if you're using it on electronic components, it could cause damage to the board with how much heat you have to put on there. So I wasn't able to desolder it from the board with conventional equipment. I had to contact a friend of mine, and he was able to use his high-end equipment to try to get that off. So I want to give a shout out to that guy. He did a great job. Check out his YouTube channel. It's Water King Untouched. As you can see here, I've got my controller, and there is a discolored area on the bottom of the controller where the thumbstick used to be. You'll see there's 14 holes there, and it looks like there's some silver circles around those. That is actually the contacts that are used for the thumbstick to actually make the connection to the board. It did take a little bit of time. We had to use a high temperature solder gun that uses hot air to push through to get the solder off, the silver solder off. So what we're going to be doing next is putting in and reinstalling the new thumbstick. As you can see behind the controller here, there are all the other parts. Again, the controller had the shoulder button problem where it was snapped off, and of course the parts that are in the far back there are all the leftover parts that were from the other thumbstick that was stuck in there. So what we're going to do to start, reinstall the new thumbstick. So I'm just going to take the thumbstick here. We're going to find where the bottom of where on the controller it actually fits, and as you can see, it's got to be by the, you want to line up the little contacts and push with some pressure to get the pins to come through. Once the pins come through the motherboard, it does kind of hold itself in place, but you want to make sure the pins go all the way through. Sorry for the blurry footage here, but it does once it goes all the way through. Unfortunately, on the bottom of these newer replacement thumbsticks, there are two pieces of plastic that protrude on the bottom of the thumbsticks, which you will need to remove with a knife. So I'm cutting those. I cut those off. There's, like I said, two little circles of plastic on the bottom. You have to remove those. They do protrude a little too much, which will make it so the contacts don't make a clean connection to the motherboard. Once you get that thumbstick in place, what you are then going to do is realign your back board to the front board, and you are just going to squeeze them together to make that connection. Make sure that if the headphone jack falls out, you reinstall the headphone jack before you try putting everything back together. Once we get that settled together, what we're going to do is put some flux on the contact points so the solder actually sits right on there. Now, I am not going to make this a clean solder. I'm not trying to make it look fancy. It's going to be covered by the controller anyway. All I want to do is make sure that it works. So what I'm going to show you here is a very sloppy soldering job, so you guys at home know that you don't need to be a pro solderer to be able to put the controller back together. So what I'm going to do is I have to put solder on the 14 points that make the contact to the board so the thumbstick works. So there are 14 points. You want to be careful. You don't want to touch anything but those points that are on the controller. Once you get that done, you can put your controller back together. Again, you can make some really ugly solders like I am doing right now. You can clean those up afterwards if it really bothers you. In this case, it doesn't really bother me. Like I said, it's going to be inside of a controller. You're not going to really notice the solder joints so long as it works. We can start reassembling our controller. And how I'm going to do that, or what I'm going to do with that, is I'm actually going to customize this controller to look a little different. Now, I've picked up a bunch of parts online. I was able to get some parts from Extreme Rate on Amazon. So I have a new faceplate here that I want to install. That looks pretty cool as far as I'm concerned, looks pretty cool. It actually matches my Destiny character. I really like the contrast between the two colors that I'm going to be using here. What I'm going to be doing is reinstalling some of these buttons. I have these really nice royal blue, almost like an anodized royal blue, that I'm going to be using for some of the buttons, and it's going to contrast really nicely with this orange faceplate. And here it is. We are back on the Halo game, and the controller is finished in its final form, and here it is. So, Xbox One Elite controller, what I ended up doing here, again, we had the stick drift here, and as you can see, there is no more stick drift. We replaced that part inside. We had to desolder those 14 points. After we desoldered those 14 points using a really strong soldering iron, we then replaced it with the new one, resoldered it in there. Again, not even a super duper great job. It was a pretty shoddy soldering job that I did to put it back in there, just to show you that you don't have to be a master solderer in order to do any of the soldering stuff. And then of course we had the broken bumper, which is pretty significant with these Xbox One Elite controllers. It's a significant problem. We then upgraded the faceplate to an orange faceplate. We've actually replaced these nice royal blue. We have the royal blue triggers on top. I kept the green button here, and as you can see around the back of the controller, I've got the rechargeable battery. It is orange with the black. And then, of course, we still have the green buttons on the back of the controller as well. So I did want to map this out after one of my, oh, and we did the buttons on the front with the switch. I wanted to do these buttons with the contrast there, make the controller look really custom. This is my new custom controller, and there it is. a customized Xbox One Elite controller for a fraction of the cost. I will leave a link in the description below of all the parts that I used for this build. If you did like this video, leave it in the comments below. Let us know how we did. And if you liked the video, don't forget to give us a big thumbs up. Let us know how we're doing. If you haven't done so already, consider subscribing to the channel. And once you do that, don't forget to hit that little bell down at the bottom. It notifies you every time we make a new video. Guys, I really do appreciate your time and stopping by. Again, I really hope you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.